Hi, my name is Shannon Scott and I'm with Creative Grace Homes, and I'm here today for another small business showcase with Joe Tutchton of Tutchton Appraisal. He's been working in this field for 38 years, give or take, and is independent, loves what he does, and we're just here to learn more about what's happening in the crazy real estate market in Denver, Colorado and the surrounding areas. Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
Great, Shannon. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it is good to be here. So I like doing these Zooms. We're at the comfort of our own home. We don't have to go and wear a mask right now because we're wearing a mask everywhere else in
Right.
life. And so what drove you to do appraisals? I mean, you've been doing it for 38 years. There must be something that you like about it. And so
Well,
why did you choose to do it?
what drove me to do it originally was unemployment. I had been been an oil and gas landman in the early '80s. So in one of the early downturns in oil and gas, I found myself out of work and was looking around at what I might do, and realized that real estate appraisal used a lot of the same skill sets that I gained as a oil and gas landman. So it seemed like it would be an easy transition until I figured out what I really wanted to do. And it's really just in the last week or two that I've decided this is what I really want to do 38 years later.
Well, that's good. That's good that it's coming together for you.
Yep.
Sometimes it's perfect timing, right?
Right.
You keep doing it and then you realize, oh, I think I really like this. Yeah.
And I do.
So your primary service is appraising. And you're connected to banks or lenders or however that traditional streamline of business comes.
Appraisal management companies these days.
Appraisal management companies, right? And so of course I can't refer you. You and I don't talk that much. You know, the whole 2008 thing that happened.
Sure.
We
Sure.
can't, talk much about anything really, which is fine.
Most of my mortgage clients manage their own appraisal staff, but I prefer working with mortgage lenders that do. But appraisal management companies have their role. They're okay.
That's good. That's good because you went through that transition, from the 80s and the 90s, and now you transitioned through the 2008, and here we are in 2020 in a very strange time, honestly. COVID
Sure.
has been interesting for you, and I'm imagining that it didn't really impact you that much.
That's
or did
true.
you get busier, or what? I mean, besides being protective in what you were doing.
Well, the thing that's been interesting about this, and I've talked to a number of my peers that are in the same situation, real estate appraisal, particularly residential real estate appraisal, at least in this market, is primarily sole practitioners working by themselves out of their houses.
Oh.
And we were classified as essential personnel right from the beginning. So for most appraisers that I talk to, things really haven't changed for us very much. It's not like we were going to offices before. We are in and out of people's homes, but often those places are vacant. So appraisers don't typically come into contact with a lot of people or groups of people. Almost all of our work is done in a kind of solitary way. So in many ways, we're ideally suited to thriving in an environment like this.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
That is good to know because, as we've seen, the market is just, well, of course it slowed down for a little while, but it is just really picking up so quickly. And, it's maybe a month worth of inventory that's sitting out there. And so with COVID, I mean, this is the best way to serve the community, right? Is bringing a home to someone. And is there a particular market that you work in the most? Are you working with appraisals for first-time home buyers, or do you know that? Or what kind of market are you working in primarily?
Well, if we're talking about, really what we've seen over the last 2, 3 months, I would say that, well, we saw a significant downturn in sales volume in the month of May. Through the 3+ weeks of June, we've recouped all of that. So, but in general, I would say that we're looking at an uptick in refinance activity and sort of a depression of sales activity. Although, as I'm saying that, I'm seeing more and more purchase activity come across my desk. So I'd say we had a little bit of a downturn in May, but we've already made up and then some that just in June. Now it's going to be a much slower June than June of 2019 or June of 2018, but it will still be the best month of the year in terms of sales volume.
Which is good.
I think so.
That's good considering everything that's happening,
I think our ability to continue to get deals done was severely tested in May. And it may be tested yet again as we see what's going on. Just in the last couple of days news, we see cases coming up again. I have talked to people who have this sense that the market is sort of acting well. And it's summertime, rates are low.
Right.
Denver's it's a great market. It's interesting to wonder how great a market would it be were it not for having a pandemic at the same time. So there's some lost opportunity there, I suppose.
When you're out and about, it doesn't seem like lost opportunity.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. There was a brief window there where one of the best things about it was that traffic was back to like what it was in the 90s, but those days are over.
Yeah.
Everybody's back out on the roads again.
Yeah. Well, you've been serving the community for, over 30 years. And so what do you need from the community? What can you get back? What do you feel in your industry that would really help you out in what you do? You're being in service to others. How could the community that you're serving be, help you out?
That's an interesting question. And I knew you were going to ask that. I haven't really thought about it that much. But now that I am thinking about it, I would say, particularly in, like you're a realtor, one of the things that, and it's a small thing that I would ask of realtors is that they stop printing out all of the paper that they seem to still want to give me. There's a strong desire on the part of real estate agents to hand me the folder that has, in some cases, hundreds of sheets of paper, printouts from the MLS or various promotional materials. And all I would ask of the community that I serve, to the extent that I serve you guys in your transactions, is to email me that stuff instead.
Okay.
Let's not use all that paper.
That's a great idea. Because you end up shredding it or whatever you do with it, right?
Yeah, I and most appraisers I know try to run a pretty much paperless office.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and we're moving that way even as we speak, especially in this time. We're doing Zoom. There's a lot of things that we're not doing face-to-face, and you can find everything online.
The other thing that I will say, especially in this time, is, again, speaking again to real estate agents in particular, don't feel like you need to come meet me at the property. I understand that there are circumstances where that just is the way it has to be. But if that's not the case, if it's not that for some reason you have to be there,
right?
I encourage you to, since we're trying to reduce as much contact in other people's residences as possible, let the appraiser go in on the lockbox. And if you need to communicate afterwards, do so by phone or email. And I really like the idea of email communications because there's a record of that and it can go into the appraiser's workflow.
Right. And it really is in the best interest of the client for the realtor to not be there.
I'm not sure. Your client or my client?
Well,
Your client.
The client, it's my client or whoever.
Right.
I just think
Remember,
that creates that separation in the transaction, right?
right. Well, what it does for your appraiser is two things. Right now, during a plague, of course, it's one less encounter, right?
Right.
It's one less encounter inside somebody else's house.
Right.
But the other thing that it does is that it gives your appraiser flexibility in terms of his schedule, and how he fits something into his day. So those are, I mean, and as I think about my answers to your questions, look how little of things those are. I would have to say, on balance, I don't need anything from my community. My community and I are doing just fine.
Well, but that's okay because we need to save paper anyway, right?
We do.
We do need to save paper. It saves resources. Then you have to figure out what to do with it. It could be information that needs to be shredded. There's just,
like I said, I try not to keep paper files. So having that information electronically helps me in that I build my work file, and all of that information is there in case anybody ever asks about it later. Whereas the stack of paper implies that I have a file cabinet to keep it in, and I don't. So
a file cabinet, that's an old word. Well, you do have a file cabinet.
Right, but it's on my computer, not
on your
in my
computer.
office.
Yeah. And so can you also, this is another fun question. I like this question. What is something about you that folks don't know? It doesn't have to be business wise. I mean, it can be just something that,
I saw you were going to ask that too, so I had to think about that. I would say it's that with the right tools, I can remove all of the crab meat from the Chesapeake Bay blue crab in less than a minute.
Okay.
I grew up on the bay. Part of my youth was spent on the bay in Maryland, so I can clean a blue crab like nobody you know.
That's good to know. I'll keep that in mind for later. That's good. And so the last question I have is, what advice, given the market that we're in, and I know that you do daily stats, and because you love that data and it helps you in your business.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give to people listening to this?
Well, if you're, I would say that the first piece of advice I would give is the advice that you see when you drive through neighborhoods. My first piece of advice is to be kind. And my second piece of advice is if you're looking at real estate, I think it's important to consider to be neighborhood centric, to try and work with the people that are in your neighborhood. Nobody knows those markets better than the people that are in there. And I think I would urge people to be cautious of the electronic, web-based buyers and sellers of real estate. They're not in your neighborhood for the most part.
Right.
They don't know your market. They certainly don't have your interests at heart. Whereas the people who work in your neighborhood do. So that would be my advice.
Well, thank you. I like that advice. I'll spread the word. Please work with me.
Right.
I love my neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know things, especially you walk it, you know the little ins and outs, the best places to eat, all those wonderful things. So
sure. I think staying local, hyper local in real estate is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Joe, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me a little bit about what you do. And is there anything else you want to share with us before we sign off on this lovely conversation?
Black Lives Matter.
Exactly. Black Lives Matter. That is for sure.